What is up, Bitcoin entrepreneurs? I'm Chris, and welcome to the channel here. And we're live again, and we're going to be going over an important topic that I think is very important within the knowledge of the Bitcoin network, because what we're going over is proof of work. All right, so proof of work is the protocol that the Bitcoin pretty much runs off of. And what's important about the protocol is the fact that, you know, a protocol is something that you can't change. It's going to keep continuing to do the same process, over and over. And so this is what the Bitcoin network pretty much runs on, and it's what grounds the Bitcoin network into physical reality. And so that's why I want to get into this today, because people don't understand what grounds Bitcoin and what makes it like an actual safe haven and inflation hedge for your wealth. So let's just get right into this, because I have a whole thing that I want to do. I want to bring you through this, and we'll tell you what proof of work is and what it does and how it's very important. Real quick before I do that, I want to tell you again, which I do all the time, to join the school group Bitcoin entrepreneurs, and we can chat, we can post on there, and they have the whole classroom. It's the place we can have a community for this channel. So there you go. Links are in the description for everything. So let's get into this. What is proof of work? Okay, so like I said, proof of work is the protocol that Bitcoin runs on. Okay, now what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is energy that is turned into money at the most basic form. What proof of work does is it makes Bitcoin real. It grounds Bitcoin to the physical realities of the earth we live on via physics, right? If you don't have proof of work in like a computer system, you just have a database, which databases are great. They've changed the world, literally, but it's just a database. And databases typically aren't conservative because you can just duplicate files. That doesn't help in terms of if you want to become money. You can't do that. That's the Byzantine general's problem. You can look that up. But let's bring up proof of work in the Bitcoin network. So what this means is you have Bitcoin miners. Sure, you've heard this, of course. The whole origin of Bitcoin is the Bitcoin miners. And what miners are machines called ASIC chips. They have one task, and that task is to mine Bitcoin. So you have these machines, ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits, that need electricity to run. That's super basic. You have these miners, you plug them into electricity. What these miners do, what these ASICs do, is they compete to solve the SHA-256 puzzle. And now, what is a SHA-256 puzzle? It's basically just computations that are happening, mathematical computations, and then once those computations are completed and actually figured out via the energy that's brought in, electricity, once they complete this puzzle, they get rewarded with Bitcoin, and it adds a block to the blockchain. It's like creating a Bitcoin. This is the whole process. So it's complicated mathematical equations to break the block, to add a block to the blockchain, and then you get a Bitcoin, and then whoever owns the machine that broke the block gets the reward, and that reward is 3.125 Bitcoin at this moment. The other aspect to this is that you have a difficulty adjustment, and it's every 2 weeks, which is roughly 2016 blocks. So I hope that all makes sense. But the difficulty adjustment, we went over this in the last video, it changes how hard it is in order to create a Bitcoin. And this system here keeps 10-minute blocks. So that's the average, a 10-minute block, and it's the balancing act between the proof of work protocol. And we talked about this in the last video too, I believe. But this is it keeps a 10-minute block. This is the balancing act. So let's just go into some data real quick before I get into this, because many people will say that the energy consumption of Bitcoin is like bad, right? They just don't understand how the network works, because it's not just taking energy out of the system and wasting it. But what I want to do is just explain how we essentially have the most powerful computing network on Earth with the Bitcoin network. But let me just tell you why this is good. There's something known as the hash rate. So the hash rate is total compute power that's dedicated to the mining process of Bitcoin. And what we have is 945 plus or minus EH per second. Okay, let me explain what that means in terms of power. So we have 1 exahash equals 1 quintillion hashes per second. And a hash is part of the SHA-256 cryptographic protocol that's happening here. So we get into this in a minute, but a hash is what you use in coding to ground essentially the value to the physical means of the earth. We have 1 exahash, 1 quintillion hashes per second. Okay, so we have 945 exahash per second. So obviously that's absolutely crazy amount of power, because that would mean we would have 945 quintillion hashes per second. So like whatever that means to you, that's a crazy amount to figure out on your own, in your own brain, because we can't even comprehend these types of numbers like quintillion. I mean, what is it that, you know? But we can understand that that's a ton of energy, right? Okay, so let's look into this. We got 170 to 200 terawatt hours per year. So a terawatt is 1 trillion watts per hour. So we have an immense amount of energy that's within the Bitcoin network. So that's just some data there to just show that we have the most powerful computing network on Earth within the Bitcoin network. Sorry if that was super confusing. 945 exahash per second. So that's 945 quintillion hashes per second. Just an easy breakdown. There you go. We have 170 to 200 terawatt hours per year. A terawatt is 1 trillion watts per hour. This is the biggest computing network we have. And the reason why I want to tell you this is just because, like, we're dealing with the most powerful computing network. Like, do you understand what that means? That's breaking Amazon, that's breaking Microsoft, that's breaking Apple. Like, we have all the computing power into the Bitcoin network. And why that's important is because that's what is securing the network. If the miners have this much compute power, it means that your money in terms of Bitcoin is being secured by the most powerful computing network on Earth. I mean, that alone should be something worth considering in terms of the wealth for the future and your lineage, meaning your children, your grandchildren. Bitcoin is the most powerful computing network on Earth. Like, this is a big point. Okay, but let me tell you why this is good, because we have it's very confusing talking about the different, the compute power that's involved in this. But what Bitcoin does is you can use stranded energy to mine Bitcoin. So meaning all the places on Earth that aren't civilized, that have renewable sources like rivers, waterfalls, heavy winds, volcanic power, like all these things we can take and turn into value via Bitcoin all across the world. All you need is, ASIC chips, ASIC miners, and then you just have to plug in the electricity. So you can use all the stranded energy in the world and make it actually valuable. The other thing is like renewable energy. So you can use renewable energy to mine Bitcoin. I mean, this is the apex of the Bitcoin network, is to be able to use the types of energy that would help the civilization to turn it into value. And also, Bitcoin can stabilize grids in terms of you have these stranded energy networks that are around. You can turn them into Bitcoin, and then you can stabilize countries, because now countries can run off of Bitcoin instead of a currency that's just crazy debased and isn't conservative, because it's not based off anything, and the whole countries fail. Like, this is what we've seen in many places. Like, we've seen it in like Argentina, we've seen it in Lebanon, we've seen it in all African countries, the whole shebang. You can study all this stuff. I'm not telling lies here. Like, we're securing the network with tons of computing power, and at the same time we're using stranded energy and renewable energy, and we're stabilizing grids in weak countries. So argue all you want, but this is better than any system you can think of in terms of energy usage. So that's that. Let me talk about why proof of work matters in terms of like its real world anchor. Because you have things like Ethereum, and you also have all the other crypto markets. They don't run on proof of work. Like, the only one that runs on proof of work is Doge, and Doge was literally created to be a joke. And so, Doge has a market cap, but it's also just centralized somewhere, whoever's making the Doge. It's not, Doge is just bullshit like all the rest. But Bitcoin runs on proof of work, no CEO, it's decentralized, the whole thing. Okay? So let me just tell you why proof of work matters right now. Let's anchor this to the real world, and this is where it gets intense. Proof of work, in order to create Bitcoins, it requires physical energy in the form of electricity. So we just talked about this, right? The miners are doing the SHA-256. The harder the puzzle is, the more electricity it requires. They're going to figure out the puzzle, and then it rewards the machine that figured out the puzzle with the block reward, which is 3.125 Bitcoin. So it's like rewarding, but it's a small chance. You have to, put a lot of energy into it. So it's not just numbers on a screen here, you see. Like, it's converting energy into digital, abstract representation of value. Let's get into that. Right here, we've got a Satoshi quote that I wrote down about the only way to prevent the double spending problem. You have cash. Like, if I handed you a $20 bill to paint my house, I no longer have that $20 bill, and we'll get into this in a little bit. But so this is Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin's quote about the only way to prevent double spending. So he goes, "Proof of work is the only solution I've found to make peer-to-peer eCash work without a trusted third party." Now let's get into why. And this gets a little intense here. So we have cyberspace, which is, what we're dealing with right now. Like, you're on the internet, whether you like it or not. You're watching me right now, and it's not physical reality, right? I mean, like that wasn't real, right? It was just an animation on the screen. Like, it wasn't actually a real fire or anything. I'm not burned. It was just the abstraction of a fire. Also, I mean, even you watching me right now, it's not me. You're not actually seeing the physical me, the physical atoms that represent me. You're seeing an abstraction of me because I was able to record it, right? So it's not the physical me. So what Bitcoin and what proof of work actually does is it gives abstract meaning to circuits, and then the circuits give meaning back to us. And by circuits, if you don't know, I'm going to get super deep with this, is what runs your computers, what runs all electronics and the internet and all technology you see. Not all technology, but all like digital technology you see is run by circuits. It's all an abstraction. So if we wanted to go into an analogy on this, like a folder on a computer, right? There's no folder. Like, it's an abstraction of what we would consider organization of data that we would call a folder, because you would take a physical folder and you put paper into it. But on a computer, you have a folder, but it's only called a folder because it's an abstraction of what we know as a folder. Like, the computer isn't taking it as a little tiny space where all the data is compiled. It's organized in zeros and ones. It's a computer, right? The folder doesn't exist in the digital world. It's just the abstraction of what a folder would be to us in physical reality. Now let's get into the conservative thing. So when you send a file to somebody, it's non-conservative. I can send, okay, so for example, my book. You can get my book in a PDF form on my website, also link in the description. But then if you were able to download that PDF and get it on your computer, you could send it to your buddy. You could send it to somebody else. You could send it to, your entire mailing list. It's non-conservative. You could send it over and over and over and over, and then you still have the PDF. But if you get the book, it's conservative. Like, this book is really here. It's, if I gave this book to you, then I no longer have the book. So it's like as simple as that. It's conservative because it's physical. So how do you tie together the digital and the physical world? Well, that's what proof of work does. So proof of work ties physical into digital. Proof of work ties physical to digital, but it uses the hash cost function to make this happen. And the hash cost function is Adam Back's discovery. And you can research Adam Back. Great dude. About 1996, I believe, is when he figured this out. It tied the physical into digital, which is great, by using real world energy to compute complex equations. And then once they figure out those equations, they create something. And that's the only way to do it. So it ties it into physical. You can't create something out of nothing. You have to have the physical to do it, right? This is conservation of energy. This is the first time. Proof of work uses the hash cost function. Okay, so this is like super important. Let's get into something like proof of stake, which is Ethereum. I'm sure you've heard of Ethereum. If you've heard of Bitcoin, I'm sure you've heard of Ethereum. And this is the main difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin, is that with Ethereum, there is no physical. Like, they're using the proof of stake network. And that's for another video. I'm not going to explain the proof of stake here, but there's no physical. Okay? So if you think about it, Ethereum doesn't even exist. It's not tied to anything physical. It's just in the digital realm. So this is the biggest problem that people think with Bitcoin, is they think it doesn't exist. It's all digital. Well, it's tied to physical reality versus something like proof of stake, which is Ethereum and most of the blockchain. It doesn't exist. It's not tied to anything. It really is digital. Okay? It's not the same. And it's why Bitcoin will always be better, because it's tethered to the real world. Like, an abstracted world requires trust. So ETH is just an abstracted world. They use their own rules, but it requires trust. So you just have to require somebody to, like, keep it going and keep it, profitable, and just to store your value. Why would you ever trust that? Why would you ever trust somebody to keep your wealth? Because that's exactly what the banks do, and they're terrible at it. And we run on the dollar, and we just lose all our purchasing power via inflation. So why would you ever trust something like that? It's just stupid, right? So in order to create a Bitcoin, it requires the proof of work. And the proof of work is the important thing here. It's tied to reality, which makes it valuable, right? Same thing with the dollar. The dollar is no longer bound by anything physical, but it used to be. Gold. It was tied to gold. So the fact that it's not bound to anything nowadays makes it less and less valuable. So, like, Nixon took the gold off the gold standard, in 71, and it was, it was back and forth between this for a long time before then, but 71 he took it off the gold standard, and then it just essentially meant nothing, because how are you backing it against anything physical? You're not, because they can just print it at any time. But when it was tied to gold, it was way more valuable, because you actually had to have the manpower and the machines and the time, which you can't get any time back. You had to get the manpower, machines, and time to actually get the gold out of the ground. And then so it made the dollar worth something. But it's not worth anything anymore. So it's losing value every single year because they just keep printing more, and it's not based on anything. They can just print more. That's a problem. So just it makes it less and less valuable. This is the problem with the dollar. This is what we talked about on our last episode. So let's go to the Bitcoin difficulty adjustment, because it's the balance within the proof of work protocol. Because we talked about last time how higher energy makes Bitcoin harder to make, and then lesser energy makes Bitcoin easier to make. So it's a balancing act so that bad actors can't just take over the Bitcoin network with more energy and just pump and pump and pump energy into the system. It makes it, it's a balancing act. So there's a capped supply. It's going to take time, and it's a fair game system. Okay. Another point on this is it breaks the double spend problem. So you can't just will Bitcoin into your wallet and then use that to send to people, because then you don't have the asset anymore. You can't double spend a Bitcoin. So this is an incredible problem solving technology. To finish this all off, I know a lot was said there, but the reason that Bitcoin is valuable isn't just because it's tied to the real world. It's 100% like is tied to the real world, but it's via electricity. And this is important because it's a safer way to use energy to create value, in that you can have wars, and trust me, they've had many wars over gold, right? And many other things, obviously, oil and whatnot. But just using the electricity to make the asset, it's a safe and peaceful way of creating value that doesn't have to, you don't have to kill humans in order to protect it, because it's just energy, it's just electricity. It's the only asset that doesn't threaten a human life to defend the wealth that you're trying to store over time as humans from your time and energy, which you don't get back, right? So it's tied to reality in a safe and peaceful way. But not only does it do this, is it's completely secure based off of the energy that's used on it. Whereas something like gold, you use all the energy to get it, it's completely wasted, except for the fact that you got the gold. But then you still have to expend tons and tons of energy to even just move the gold from where you got it to some vault in Switzerland or whatever they want to do. And then you have to have guards and people protecting the vault. And if anybody tried to steal from the vault, you'd have to kill those people. It's not a great system. It's really just not a great system. So the Bitcoin, the security that the Bitcoin brings is just way better. In order to break the Bitcoin network, let's just talk about this for a second. We talked about this in the last episode, I think, but just to close this off, you would have a 51% of the Bitcoin network. So obviously that's absurdly expensive, right? So there would be nobody could really do it. I mean, it would cost the amount of Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, all their compute power together, wouldn't even come close to breaking the Bitcoin network. It's absurdly expensive. You would have to control the majority of the hash power. It's not completely impossible, but it's just completely economically stupid, because you would lose all that money. You would have to be the richest person in the world to create infrastructure and to attack the Bitcoin network with compute power. But then you would just crush the Bitcoin value, and then you would lose all the money. So then everybody would just be destitute that had, Bitcoin, and including the attacker, and it wouldn't help anything. Like it would just be dumb. Like you would just be watching the world burn at that point. But so you'd be better off just buying Bitcoin, and then you'd be rich as hell, and you'd be able to do some other evil plot, which is not recommended, but that's just essentially what would happen. But it's not plausible, right? It's like a super villain type idea, and the super villain would have to be richer than like countries. So this is just something that is would just stay in the comic books, right? It's not plausible. So yeah, proof of work allows Bitcoin to just be digital energy, and it allows physical reality to tie with the digital for the first time. And so you're able to store your economic energy and your time and get out of the deflationary system that is the dollar. So proof of work is what we should all be thankful for, essentially. And then we should also be very thankful to Satoshi for using the proof of work network, figuring out how to make a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which it is. And we're all very thankful to Satoshi Nakamoto for that. He will go down as a legend for creating one of the most advanced technological inventions of my lifetime, for sure. So very incredible, and this is why I want to promote all these things. That's pretty much it for what I want to say here. I've got nothing else on my document here, but I feel like I got everything out, and I appreciate all of you for watching. I hope you guys had some understanding with that explanation there, and I hope you got something out of that. If you did, hit the subscribe button, because we'll be back here every Saturday. We keep creating videos. We're going to keep promoting the Bitcoin network, and also all the links in the description for my book. We have my school group, and also you can get 10% off Tangem cold wallets with my code, and you can get up to $80 in Bitcoin rewards when buying a new ledger signing device. And all these links are in my description. So I appreciate you all, and peace.